entrepreneurship. They were the things that kept people from becoming entrepreneurs. You got an A for not making any mistakes. Everybody was an individual, and they kind of were cutthroat with each other to get better grades. And then the schools are kind of run by lawyers now. Nothing personal over there, Caitlin, but the schools are run by lawyers now, and they're afraid to take risks with their students. And so I decided I would do all the opposite thing. I would make it was all team-based. The students all had to work together as a team, and it was pretty interesting. You could identify the straight A students by the ones who would come up to you and say, well, look, I did this, but my team members are doing nothing. And I'd look at them and go, well, the points go to the team, so whatever you do, that's great. And eventually we have different projects. It's all project-based too, so we have different projects, and they have to work together as a team. And it turns out that the projects are so diverse that there's always one team member who really thrives in that environment. So leadership gets passed along, and they learn to lead, they learn to follow, and they learn, okay, so that's team-based. Team-based turns out to be, they learn at an extraordinary rate, because a lot of people came up to me later and said, I worked much harder than I usually do, but I didn't want to let my team down. I want to be a part of this team. And so then the other thing we did was we said, we're going to take risks with you. And we put together, we didn't just, we put together a 36-hour hackathon where pretty much everybody stays awake the entire time and puts this whole thing together. And then we send them out for a week with Navy SEALs and Special Forces and Army Rangers to learn leadership, but it's also, we call it survival training. And so far, everybody has survived, but it's a risk no other school would ever take. They're out there with weapons, they're out there with on refugee boats, they're doing some crazy things. And what I'm really trying to do is drive creativity. I'm driving these people to think, well, during survival training, they're thinking, well, what's my downside? I found my downside. And so everything else is up. And the best entrepreneurs are the ones who are only thinking of the upside, and they're only driving that upside. And so then we bring speakers in, and we don't allow the speaker to stay any more than 40 minutes, but then we say to speak for any more than 40 minutes, but then each speaker is asked to create a project for the students to do. And so then the students have to do these projects that come around. And we have found that this is actually creating some real entrepreneurial energy. We've had 1,200 students now. They've started 400 companies. Few of them, one became a unicorn. One woman created a fiber line that goes up the fallopian tube and detects cancer without damaging the fallopian tube. And she just sold her business for $275 million. And she started it with us. And that was, school's only 8 years old. They get this can-do attitude. They're always trying to improve the world with their thinking and that kind of thing. And the ones who don't go out and start businesses or join companies or go back to school, different things happen to them. The ones who go back to school, either their grades go straight to straight A's, or their grades go down because they've got an entrepreneurial project that they're working on at the same time. And but they tend to be happier. But then the ones who go to big companies get promoted faster because they're willing to take risks. They're willing to put their heads out on the line. So that was the basis for, that was the basis for our ecosystem. That was the beginning. And so then I thought, well, you know, what else can we do? What else should we do? How do we improve this and build on what we've done? And so, well, one thing that happened was COVID, and they shut down our school, and so we had to go virtual. But it turned out our 6-week in-person program was extraordinary, but our virtual program of 2 weeks turns out to be to actually be almost as good, because we impart our meme on them. We put this way of thinking into their heads, and they realize that, you know, the schooling they got, you know, really didn't prepare them for being out there in the world. And here, although it did teach them a lot, and here was this great opportunity to be different, to try something different. So then we built an incubator. My son built an accelerator called Boost, and then we built an incubator. And so the idea was you learn how to be an entrepreneur. We don't sort of teach too much about it. We teach a little bit about what a Series A or B or whatever it is. We're really just teaching, we're teaching the human. We're creating superhumans, people who are really extraordinary. And they've come from 86 different countries, and they've done extraordinary things. So then we bring them through our accelerator, and my son created this accelerator, and he calls everybody a cockroach. And he gets them all. He said, "Why are you a cockroach? Because you never die. Whatever it takes, you never die." And he created the first Bitcoin and crypto accelerator, and then he took on AR and VR, and now he's into exoskeletons and oceans. But he's sort of picking them off one at a time, because then when people come together, they're all of a single, they're kind of going after a single industry, and they get to know each other, and there's this extra benefit that happens by putting all that synergy together. And then the incubator is just a place for entrepreneurs to go hang out. And I'd say it's been moderately successful. I think it could be a lot better. But we, I guess we operated a little like the government here. This is the one thing that wasn't really working, so we expanded it. We put incubators all over the world. We worked with this guy who was taking over hostels and managing them, and sort of creating new ways of looking at it. And we said, well, wait, why don't you just turn those into startup houses? And so we created, now we've got something like 13 Draper startup houses around the world. And then we wanted to, we really are trying to be a magnet for all these entrepreneurs to come, and eventually we fund them. And so the way we did that was we tried a couple of shows. We tried the Startup U, which totally bombed in the US. It was a show about the school, but apparently took off on it was sort of on a teenage network, ABC Family in the US, but then in Central and South America, it just took off on their History Channel. So that now when I go to Central and South America, they're not giving me their business plans. They want selfies, because I was a part of the show. Anyway, then we did another show called Meet the Drapers that has been much more successful. Started with an Indian partner, and we now have 9 million views. And it's me, my dad, my sister, a couple of other people, and we have a show that is like Shark Tank, only the viewers can crowdfund, so they can put $100, $1,000 behind one of these entrepreneurs. So we think that we're kind of, and then our ecosystem also includes Draper Associates, which is my venture fund, but the Draper Venture Network, which is 25 relationships with venture capitalists all around the world. So what we're trying to do is be there. We want to be a magnet for people wherever they are, but we also want to be there for them if they need funding wherever they are. And so we built these things out. It's interesting. It's been a little more haphazard the way we build it, but now it seems to start to make sense. And I think I'm looking at Wyoming and I'm thinking, yeah, we should have a Draper startup house here. We should have we should have business plan competitions. We should do all these things here because we're always looking. You know, I was the first Silicon Valley venture capitalist to go into China when Deng Xiaoping said, "We're going to have an open market." And then I was the first one out of China when the guy said, "I'm going to be the dictator forever. And I'm going to own all of the businesses." You know, like, what the heck? So I was the first one out. And I'm always looking for leadership in geographic regions where there is a business-friendly environment and a trend toward business-friendly environment. And that tends to be a good place to start investing because you kind of have the wind at your back when you do it that way. I mean, we've got money trapped in China because of this dictator. So that's kind of it. It's I heard all this stuff going on with the university, and I think that is really good to do cross-discipline work. And I think that if you think about putting a business plan together where you have to have people from two disciplines to participate, I think that would be incredibly valuable. And then, of course, we are looking to work with labs wherever they may be to connect these students that are ready to go and dynamic and great, passionate to some of this interesting science, because we think that combination might create the next big unicorn. So that's it. So I'm open for questions or comments or whatever you guys want.
Yeah, I think let's. So we got about 30 minutes to kind of banter around, so we can take a longer form approach both in Q&A. Josh, Dorrell, I might start with you because we were having a conversation last night, and the question I think that you asked, paraphrasing it, had to do with alignment of incentives and kind of what does matter and what doesn't matter, and so I guess, you know, if you have something to address Tim with as someone who obviously is going to continue to experiment, and a lot of us on this side of the table have done that kind of thing and plan to keep doing more of it, but Tim's done it as prolifically as anybody in this space, and is willing to share the oopses too, which I think is awesome. What does that mean? How does that clarify or muddy up your sense of alignment and where WBC could enable something, not just Draper U or Draper Startup Houses or Blue Ocean or Sandcastle, but all this stuff, the center? Where does the WBC fit as it relates to your good jobs kind of mandate in creating the right kind of incentives or partnerships?
Yeah, thanks, Chris. And Tim, you know, a lot of the things that obviously that you've done, you've done them and you've been successful and you've failed at these things, which, you know, all of those failures are really lessons, right? And one of the things that I think Wyoming has that's pretty darn interesting, and something that we can take advantage of is, as a state, we don't have a lot of what I'll call technical debt, right? So if you're in software development, one of the things that you always, and you've been doing it for a long time, you carry around this concept of technical debt. And that technical debt costs companies in software development, because a disruptor can come into the market, or a new company can start up without all that technical debt, and they can move really quickly. Sometimes not having customers and not having all of that is actually a benefit, because you're not going to change and make them upset. And so as I sort of extract what I learned in my days and in leading software development teams, and what that technical debt, when it was a gift and a curse, if you will, Wyoming doesn't really have a lot of technical debt when it comes to entrepreneurship. And that's not to say that there aren't entrepreneurs in Wyoming. And that's not to say we haven't done some things we haven't had effort to, really develop entrepreneurship and the ecosystem around entrepreneurship, which isn't just entrepreneurs, training, and money. It is those things, but we don't have what I would call a mature model. And I look at that as a very big opportunity. And so from my seat, what I'm trying to accomplish is, how do I create the environment that takes advantage of what I would consider a very frontier-like entrepreneur system, and take the right next steps, so that we can disrupt, that we can be agile, that we can utilize the policies that we have, the money that we have, in order to incentivize that system to make it take off and grow in Wyoming. Granted, we don't have a lot of that technical debt, but we also don't have a lot of deal flow, right? So we have these, I guess my question to you and others on the panel is, because we're starting from a place where we have this no technical debt, blank canvas, where do we start? Where are the best ways to do it? What are some of the things that we could either get moving on quickly and screw up so we don't do it again, or get moving quickly and do it right? And those are the things that I'd like to learn from you and the others on the panel.
Yeah, I think you're right. Technical debt, it's funny. I see that, and we look at it the same thing, and we think about it in a different way, which is that the Moore's law moves along. And so if you start a company today and you start to build that company, somebody who starts a business 2 years later is going to have at least twice as good, maybe 4 times as good of a base of technology that they can start from. So when you start from scratch, great opportunity. Well, the other thing I want to add is that I had this amazing career in the internet, backing all these companies in the internet. They transformed all these interesting industries, and I thought, wow, this is great. We've had a big impact. We transformed communications, information, gaming, media, you name it. And I thought, well, okay, I've done my thing. I've spread venture capital around the world. I've been kind of happy with how that worked. And then Bitcoin shows up with a blockchain and smart contracts and AI and surveillance. And you start looking and you go, oh my God, it's the big industries that are going to be transformed now. And starting now, you're gonna see the complete transformation of banking, insurance, healthcare, government. I mean, those are like, they're all in the trillions. These other industries don't look so big by comparison. And I realize, not only is it that it's going to be big and impactful, but it also can go one of two ways. You can go either dystopian, like, China looks like it's going, or utopian, where you start getting open borders, you get decentralized, the globe opens up, everybody gets wealthy. The world becomes one, really, where we're all interacting. And so I look and I say, this is the best time ever. And I look and I say, well, this is the most exciting thing I've ever faced in my career. And I'm so driven and dedicated to it. And I'm going to finish with one other thing. If I have a farm and you have a house and we're the only two people, and we don't do a deal, then you die of starvation and I die of exposure. And now multiply that by 8 billion people. And they're all doing something, and we're all interconnected, and they're all helping us in one way or another. We get our nuts from Brazil and our mangoes from Chile, and software from India, and we're all interconnected. Our computers, our phones, they're all tied to people who have helped in all around the world. And when you start, and so I love the decentralized world. I love that. I think that is a big deal. And when they start putting up barriers, trade barriers, any kind of barriers, we're isolating ourselves, we're hurting ourselves, and we're keeping ourselves from, a better life and a better connection to the world, because we're not going to get those mangoes, and we're not going to get those nuts from Brazil, and we're not going to get those semiconductors from Taiwan if we're blocking ourselves off. So I hope that all of you start thinking, well, maybe this nationalism isn't such a good idea. And it is true that the US is not as affected, but if this COVID lockdown keeps people from doing business with each other, the UN's projection may be right, 135 million people dying of starvation. So think in terms of connecting and how business can all connect, and then think in terms of these new technologies. With Bitcoin, you could be in Syria and then you get shoved out of your country, and if you just have Syrian money, nobody's going to take that in Greece, but you can just pull down your Bitcoin and start your life over in Greece. This decentralized world is so valuable. It allows people to connect and relate and do business wherever they are. And I think the world that's tribal is not long for this world. I think the world is now global, and this tribalism that's coming back, I think of it as the last roar of the dying lion. I think that it's like, oh no, we have to be tribal again because that's where my power base is and all that. But really, we're all much better off as those borders dissolve over time. So that and God, with like insurance, you can have you can set up an insurance company with just surveillance and an actuary and a smart contract, and people pay their premiums. And when they have a claim, they don't have to fight against some lawyer and some inspector. They can actually just get the money because, yes, from our surveillance camera, your house did burn down. And that could be the beginning of a new form of insurance, which means that, and what's government, but like 70% of it is insurance. That's going to change government too. So big industries, big world changes, and this is the most exciting time that I've ever had in my career because of all these new technologies.
So Josh, your question, and I'm going to try and extrapolate some of the things I think may have answered it indirectly, because that was a really awesome build on your initial comments, Tim. And I also think Josh is looking at a pragmatic answer that maybe is in there too, of what do I do? I'm managing CARES Act money, and I've got constraints. I've got these programs, and I've got to deploy capital, and that's important because I've got to mitigate loss of Main Street, and I've got to reinvigorate businesses until we're out of this mess. And football season's half canceled, and so I lose 100,000 people this year that normally come through, or right, these real constraints that don't necessarily deal in the venture world, but they deal in that ecosystem of survivability, like you were saying, the house and exposure. So I heard you say a couple things about tribalism. You know, in your opinion, tribalism can be a bad thing and might be a dangerous.
Oh, no,
move.
it was a good thing for many, many years.
Right.
Protect us from them.
Right. But
You know,
but
here,
now
we're going to draw a line here. You stay over here. I'll stay over here. We'll both be okay.
right.
But
But
now
now
we
it's
realize that, hey, wait, you got something going on over there.
Yeah.
And I've got something going on
Well,
over
and that's
here.
what I was gonna say, just because what I heard in that, to try and, you know, extrapolate it to maybe tee up Josh or somebody else, is that that's not a good plan for the future, right? The next decade's going to be the most transformative decade. You're seeing it at this point in your career as the most exciting time in your career. We all feel young again in our own ways, whatever that means. And yet, Josh has a directive, right? I've got to attract and retain businesses and create good jobs in the state of Wyoming. How do I do that? And at the same time, export Wyoming, the brand, right, in a way that is relevant? How do I import and export it? You know, so
Yeah, your governor said that Wyoming is the cowboy state. And I think and he's saying, well, no, we want to be kind of something else. And so either you need to rebrand Wyoming as the Bitcoin state, or you change the definition of cowboy to someone who is out there
on the
frontier with Bitcoin, the blockchain, smart contracts, AI, machine learning, all of those things, new surveillance technology.
Well, and that's
I think that is, you know, I do think that you do need a rebrand. And, you know, Caitlin has led the charge on this, you know, making it a great state for us to do business in the Bitcoin world. I mean, one thing with Bitcoin, I would love to be able to raise money in Bitcoin, invest it in a bunch of startups in Bitcoin, have all of them pay their employees and suppliers in Bitcoin, and the whole thing be on one big smart contract. So I don't have to pay all the auditors, accountants, bookkeepers, whatever, because it's all already done. Now, the government would love that too, but they've got to make sure that they get taxes somehow. But that seems so simple to anybody who's got an engineering background. It's like, you just stick it in there.
Right.
And
it's a line of code.
Yeah, it's a line of code. You stick it in there, and somehow now you got the government running with you, and I think that could happen here. I think that could be you could lead the charge, at least from the state level, on the ability. You know, by the way, I did this. I raised money in Bitcoin. I put it to work in Bitcoin in a bunch of startups. It tripled my accounting bill because it had to go from Bitcoin to dollars to Bitcoin to dollars to Bitcoin to dollars, and they were loving it. Oh, this is great. And I'm thinking, wait a second, it's not great. And Bitcoin's supposed to keep a perfect record, so why don't we just build the balance sheet and the income statement off the blockchain, and we're good. And I don't know why that's taken so long, but I'm sure it's coming. And so I kind of lead people in that way. I think I'd start thinking, first we rebrand to the outside world, Wyoming to the outside world. And part of it's doing things like this, just attracting a lot of really, you know, some great people in. And a lot of it is, and a lot of it's just branding. But then internally, make sure that you can practice what you preach. Allow people to do business completely in Bitcoin, like the whole thing. And you pay your taxes in Bitcoin. And the whole, like, as long as the whole business is in Bitcoin, you pay your taxes in Bitcoin, all of a sudden, you're going to be the most efficient, effective state to do business in. And the feds will try to catch up. And then the rest of the states will, you know, and then California will be there at the end.
Yeah. Marten, what do you think about Josh's question as far as where do we start? Give us your thoughts on Josh's question. Mike, sorry. There you go.
I think I come from an approach where yes, I agree with the branding, right? To kind of bring people in. I think the second piece needs to be almost more of an iterative process. And I think the example that I would give is a portfolio company introduced me to this test. It was called the marshmallow test, where you just had one simple goal, it's just to put them, how can you get the marshmallow to the highest point? And all you were given were marshmallows and spaghetti sticks. And so they did this with a bunch of different people. They did it with MBA students, which they failed miserably because it was just a jockey for power. It was just a jockey for power. And then actually one of the groups that did the best were the kindergartners, because they just wanted to collaborate and iterate together. And so they were building off of each other's ideas. And so I think sometimes if you prescribe just a set way of doing something, then you really limit, especially with how nimble people are here, to a lot of upside opportunities, to things that you might not discover. And it sounds like the university here has so much support for all of this interdisciplinary type of work, collaboration, education, that it doesn't. And I think as humans, we're always wanting to know, like, what's the for sure path? Like, what do I got to take right now as my next step? Because we all want to be comfortable. We're creatures of comfort. And I think if we can kind of just step back and let things come to us, then we can almost take that, approach of like second mouse gets the cheese. We have the legislation in place. We have the culture, quite frankly. And I think we brand, as Tim said, and we wait. And I think we see who we attract. And from there, I think, we iterate. And there's going to be new ideas that are coming in left and right. And I'm already feeling it from being here. And there's just tons of gears turning. And I think it's got to be also a framework too, where we set a frequency, which is why I've thought that it makes sense to come here every year for the next 4 years, because if I just come for 1 year, I don't know what value I'm going to really get out of that. And so it's going to take time. It's going to take iteration. But I think, it's not a very direct answer for you, Josh, but I think that's why you need to collaborate with partners that are in it for the long run and have the horizon that match your horizon. And from there, I think coming together and forming that one very strategic goal of what we all want, which is why I think we all kind of have all these different perspectives of what these valuable KPIs are for us. And I think, not one is going to rule them all, but I think it's going to come in a combination of the two, of all of them, or some derivative of that form. But again, I think as we need to keep things simple, I think. Build the highest marshmallow. And I think people are going to come around to that to achieve that goal. See, that's an idea that's being presented, and have it stick to the roof, right? Maybe melt it a little bit and just toss it up.
Nice.
That was collaboration.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's what we want. Oh, I didn't have my mic on.
Josh, did we answer your question? Do you want to tweak it or expand on it?
No, I think that it does answer my question. I think one of the things that, the way I kind of look at our role is to help with the collaboration, maybe help with the selling of the idea of change and how to paint that vision for Wyoming, so that we can all get aboard and understand that, what got us here won't take us there. So I think that's a big piece of what the state's role is. And then the other, is of course creating policy and incentives to accelerate that and help us compete with other states. Because while we do think collaboration and those silly lines that are on a map are in some ways just silly lines on a map, there are some practical challenges from state to state and practical competition from state to state that we face. And so, how do we balance that out? How do we collaborate yet realize that we are competing? And I guess, as this in the state's role and probably at UW's role is, how do we get the incentives right to make that happen, right? For an entrepreneur and for someone like you, you are incentivized, an entrepreneur is incentivized by that sort of that, the fun on the path, but also the payoff at the end. And when we take an institution, say the university, they have a certain incentive program built around tenure and how do you achieve that as a really big brain professor. Well, if we could tweak that in such a way so that it was encouraging entrepreneurship and businesses, and that helped the tenure track, I could see some changes. But until that time, I don't see them. So I'm looking at it from a policy, incentives, and developing an environment in which it can flourish, not necessarily being super prescriptive, but how do we develop that environment and then let that flourish? And as Marten said, how does that, that collaboration and iteration is going to define what comes next? Because we can all see a vision, but we see the building blocks. We don't know exactly what's going to happen 5 years, 10 years down the road, but we have to create that environment. And that's where I'm trying to figure out, how do we create the best environment so that it can take off and spawn with a bunch of big brains in the room, like the one you're in today.
I want to go to Steve for some comments here. I'll give one segue of my own, just because I think it tees up something that I'm curious in. I've always believed the real risk is doing nothing, and that doesn't mean everybody has to believe that. I just think that we live in a decade where if we don't do stuff right, we're not gonna like the outcome. And if we do stuff, the cement is still wet on the next 100 years. And there's very few times in humanity's history where that occurs. It typically occurs every 80 to 100 years. And we only live through one of them where we're actually active and of age where we can do something, right? Because we're either a child on the back of one or we're too old on the back of another. And so we're at that primordial moment in that way. And so that I think the embodiment that's already here, Josh, is the fact that you guys are nimble. And regardless of all the things that aren't nimble about the state, it's more nimble. But if we take the approach that we're not competing with other states, we're competing with ourselves. And Stephen, this is teeing you up because we talked about this in a different way the other day, but we sat there and looked at each other. And at one point I said, all these inputs in the mix with all these people here, if we mess this up, shame on us, right? And so, I think if we take the approach of, okay, well, if that's the worst that could happen, like if we all messed it up, if we fight, if we compete with other states, if we just don't focus on competing with what our capabilities are, what our potential has, what the ideation, what the collaboration could be, if we just don't get turned on by that, well then who cares what we don't do? Because we'll do so much more than we ever could have. And then everyone else can play if they want to, or can chase if they want to, but they're going to go to competition. So if we can take this approach of competing with ourselves individually and then as a collective, it really, in my opinion, I think it's like we take less of a chance of messing this up. But Steve, give us your thoughts on Josh's question, on your personal view. And
yeah, happy to. Look, the world has been changing increasingly rapidly in the last decade, and I do believe that COVID and the current crisis has even accelerated that rate of change. And a little bit on a follow up to Josh's question, I think the old ways of doing things and accomplishing things aren't going to be efficient enough anymore. And if we're going to succeed, we'll use Wyoming as an example. If we're going to succeed as a state in drawing the businesses and the resources to the state that we want, we can't do it as individual soldiers. We really are going to have to collaborate in ways that we've never collaborated before. And we're going to need private business. We're going to need universities. We're going to need government to work together, because at the pace today, you don't have time to experiment in the same way and make mistakes. Because if that happens, someone's going to blow past us. So, I think the unique opportunity we have before us now, particularly in Wyoming, is we've got a legislative environment that has really created enabling legislation for the state to do things that has never happened before. We've got business partners like those in this room that understand the unique attributes of Wyoming. We've got the federal government here with the Department of Energy, who sees that there's something unique going on here. So I believe what we need to do is we need to start using this team approach, and together we need to determine, what are those KPIs? What are those, what approach are we going to take, and how can we all collectively together move the ball forward? Because I just don't think with the pace of technology today, and essentially around the world, the pace of technology, that we can use the old model of, well, let's look at this, let's investigate this, let's think about this, let's create an exploratory group to look at this. Those days are gone. And so we've got a little bit of a head start here in Wyoming. And I think it behooves all of us in this room, to your point, Chris, to get together and continue to create an environment that makes it so obvious that Wyoming is the place that you want to be. And we're going to be able to do that collectively if we work with the federal government and the state government and business partners and at the university. Together, I think we're going to be such an unbelievably formidable force that I don't think, to your point, I don't think we can lose. And if we do lose, it's our own fault.
Well, and whatever we lose is 10 times more than what we would have had if we waited and tried to do it the old way, right? And I agree. Yeah.
Take it as I wouldn't take it as an insightful suggestion. Based on things I've seen in other states, I think everything you just said should be taken as a warning that if you don't do something like that, I've seen it to where it is prohibitive for external entities, the federal government, for instance, to come in and be confident in the investment, because there is so much infighting, whatever you want to call it, but having all the ducks in the row within the state is very important.
And maybe not even a warning, but an imperative. We can't do it, the same way anymore. And and it's groups like the people here in the room who, quite frankly, are going to make that change happen. I mean, I'm honored to even be sitting at this table, but quite frankly, I think it's collectively within our power to make this work.
Josh, I've got kind of an idea for the branding. I was building Draper University, and it took years to change a hotel into a school. And recently I've wanted to do a remodel, and I've had to not just one, but 2 separate historic society reports that I had to pay for, so that the historic society could say, okay, you can go do it. And all our portfolio companies are having trouble because they're worried about one thing or another. Then I went to Texas, and I realized that you could build something much faster. I was thinking, you guys could take the extreme view and say, come to Wyoming, build whatever you want. And just as the PR campaign, you don't have to make it completely like a legal thing, but if that's the message, you're going to find entrepreneurs. Build whatever you want. We're the Bitcoin capital. We accept Bitcoin. We've got 5G everywhere. I mean, all of a sudden, it's the place. Yep. And if I can go build whatever I want, I'm going to I'll be here in a heartbeat.
I love that idea. And it speaks to, the doer nature of a lot of the folks that, from all the different aspects here that are here, right? I mean, I know Josh, we spoke last night, and I see in your eyes, I can see the doerness. When we're looking at each other, we're all leaning in saying the same thing, but that calling card of like, build whatever you want, like much gathers more, right?
Yeah, so and it encourages builders to come.
Yeah, that's right. Like, don't come here and loaf. Don't come here and look for
yeah, we're not going to give you any special treatment. Yeah. And it kind of goes against a lot of what the media has been pushing with the certainly in California, what the government's been pushing. It's really like, come here. This is your, Ayn Rand moment.
Yeah. Now you're speaking Tyler's language there.
Yeah.
Don't forget the motto of this university is bucking the system since 1886.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and to some extent, I think our legislature has done that, and among the 20 bills that have been passed around this asset class, one of them is the fintech sandbox. And I'm going to way oversimplify the sandbox, but you can come here and build what you want, and as long as you're not ripping people off, we're gonna let you do it with a little bit more regulatory wiggle room. So I think Wyoming has created. I don't know if I quite summed that up quite the way you wrote it in the bill, Representative Lindholm, but am I pretty close on that?
Yeah, the genesis behind the fintech sandbox, and we weren't the first ones to think of it. Actually, Arizona was, and a little bit of Illinois, but their version sucked.
I will say that as a guy who resides in Scottsdale,
right.
We tried.
We tried. Well, and so we took their model and we hacked it a little bit. And Arizona saw what we had done and amended theirs, and then Utah also picked it up. And essentially, the big hack behind it, that is kind of a neat little trick, is if you come into Wyoming and we've got a prohibitive type law in place that would slow down your business in any way, you can just go to the Division of Banking or the Secretary of State's office, fill out your application that gives you full waived rights to whatever law you would potentially violate. As long as they agree with it, then boom, you got a 3-year period, at which point, if it's working out and everything's going good, the legislature is going to pick up that application and just change the law, because you provided the model that actually works, and because you're the first one to do it, I mean, you get that first mover advantage. So that's really handy. I did want to mention, Mr. Draper, you mentioned how being able to pay your taxes in crypto and whatnot would be nice. So we actually have got a piece of legislation moving forward. We've worked with our Department of Revenue in the state of Wyoming. They actually think they can accept crypto right now, and not just Bitcoin, but like any crypto, whether it's a stable coin or what have you. But we do have a piece of clarifying legislation that kind of provides a little bit of a backstop, so that you would be able to pay sales tax, property tax, whatever you want in those crypto assets. So I do think that'll be a valuable piece. It'll be interesting to see how far it flexes.
There's a nuance here to make the blockchain as powerful as it can be. The taxes, for instance, if you do all your business in Bitcoin, great, that's easy. Then you pay it in Bitcoin. If you do all your business in dollars, great, you do it in dollars, and you have to pay your accountants and everybody else. What I would recommend, but if you do business in Bitcoin and dollars, you've got to figure out how you're going to report, how you're going to earn your money. And if you earn it in Bitcoin, you should be able to pay it in Bitcoin, so that you have everything kept on the blockchain. So you don't have to go to the big 3 accounting firms to get the okay that, this is appropriate taxes to be paid. And I think you may have to, you'll have to figure that out, whether you draw a line to say, look, if you do all your business completely in crypto, great. If you do it all in dollars, great. But if you do it crossover, you could see people saying, well, no, I'll pay it in Bitcoin because it was, or I made money in dollars and lost money in Bitcoin. So how am I going to treat that? You got to make sure that edge case is covered.
Tim, how do we fix the accounting problem? Accounting for Bitcoin is really punitive. How do we get the?
It's so simple.
Oh, I know, but
you just need to put all the FASB rules around the blockchain, and some software engineer is going to do this. In fact, last night we were talking about it. It won't be long. So it'll be done. So then you don't have, the system changes. It's already done. So you don't need the audit. You don't need the bookkeeping. It's already done. It's all right there.
Right.
So the software has to be built so that you take all of the transactions that's gone in and out of the blockchain on your account, and you put that into a balance sheet and an income statement, a cash flow, and then you charge taxes accordingly. And then it's done.
Sure, that works for cash accounting, but the accrual accounting is the problem. That's where the FASB is just, Bitcoin under US GAAP gets the lower of cost or market. It's accounted for as an intangible. So the way I look at it is, in Wyoming, we fixed there are three pillars that have to be backwards compatible with the technology for the technology to really go mainstream. One is legal, another is accounting, and the third is tax.
Right.
We did the legal to a T here. We did the tax, everything we could do, which is basically there's zero tax on digital assets in Wyoming, period. No sales tax, no capital gains tax, no income tax, period. But we can't fix the accounting thing here.
Well, first, get rid of the accrual accounting.
Yeah.
Just go straight for cost accounting. I mean, just go straight for cash-based accounting. And I mean, accrual accounting has been fabulous for lawyers and accountants, and it has been a nightmare for all business. It's a nightmare. You know, when does your sale happen, and how does it happen? Sure, I got the sale now, and somehow I'm being charged for it, but I'm not getting paid until September of 2025. I mean, and how do I pay my taxes on that? I mean, it should all be cash accounting. People have also thought in terms of, you could eliminate all income tax, you can eliminate corporate tax, all the taxes, eliminate all of them by just putting a small transaction tax on every transaction that happens in the crypto world. You could actually get rid of all of them. And actually the government would actually, I mean, at 0.025%, it's been calculated that if 0.025% on every transaction would actually generate more money for the government than all the other taxes. And imagine how simple that would be. Just happens, goes, government does good things with it.
How hard or realistic would it be to move to all cash accounting? And then what would the unintended consequences on, call it venture formation or things like that, where the booked revenues increase enterprise value to exit, right? It changes the dynamics.
You know, there's a very strong accounting lobby that would not like that.
Right.
But I think every chamber of commerce would love it. Every business person would love it. God, the idea that you're taxed on options before you have the money.
Yeah.
These guys are desperate. They have to go, they come to me and they go, can you loan me money so I can buy my stock, so I can pay my taxes on these options that I got? Why don't we just, I mean, the government got impatient, and the accountants thought, hey, this is going to be more complexity, so more for me.
So I guess back to my, because I don't know, I'm just curious, can you even do it, right? Can you go to all cash accounting? And if you do that at the state level, does that even matter because you can't do it at the federal level? And I don't know the answer, that's why I'm asking.
Actually, you file separately, state and fed. The state can lead. I mean, sure, at first you're going to have to do both.
Both, okay.
But the state can sort of send a message, and all of a sudden the state starts generating all this cash, and these other states are going, wait, what's going on?
The hard part about Wyoming leading in that is we have no taxes. So we can't change the rules because we're starting from the position of there is no information collected by the state of Wyoming that it can share with the IRS because there is no state income tax here.
So no state income tax, but you have property tax and you have.
Yeah.
Right, but that's
corporate tax, right?
Property.
No corporate.
No
No.
corporate.
Oh, no
income tax.
corporate, no income? Yeah, I should move.
I don't know why
yes,
you're not
you really
moving
should.
Tim, we can accept you to Wyoming anytime.
To that point, though, I remember it was.
He's on Redfin right now. He said, Connor's on Connor just bought a house on Zillow.
So there was a big stink made a couple of years ago when the state of Ohio and their treasurer, who was very pro on crypto, their big stand was pay all your taxes in Ohio and we'll be good. And we were able to drown that out fairly quickly by pointing out that we don't pay those taxes in Wyoming. And so, but I do think that is a point of issue for a state like Wyoming, where states are able to gather that kind of momentum, saying, come here and we'll accept your payment in Bitcoin. In Wyoming, I mean,
You pay your Bitcoin.
You pay your property tax to your county clerk, and it's the 49th lowest in the nation. Your sales tax is 45th lowest in the nation. And so the list goes on. So it's really not an advertisement for us that you can pay your taxes in crypto, because you're not going to be paying much taxes anyways. You can pay in bubble gum. Who cares? It ain't
Okay, ignore everything I said.
So Tyler, I think actually we probably just need to change our advertising to say you can pay your taxes in anything you want, because there aren't any. We'll accept it.
Yeah. You can pay your taxes in bubble gum. Build what you want here. Pay what you want here.
Yeah, I wonder if there isn't anything, Representative Lindholm, that we could do on auditing, because the challenge is that everybody who has to have audited financial statements has to apply US GAAP, and therefore you're applying accrual accounting. And we're seeing some companies break through, like MicroStrategy put $475 million of its corporate cash into Bitcoin, but Overstock did that in 2014 and got penalized for it, because it's the same accounting as if you put gold in your corporate treasury. It's an intangible asset for accounting purposes, so it's lower of cost or market, which means you're always marking it down in the bear markets and never marking it up in the bull markets until you sell it. So it's really punitive. And I don't know how to fix that. Maybe that should be our next trick, but maybe not requiring audited financials to be compliant with US GAAP. That might.
Don't you think that the MicroStrategy, though, Caitlin, doesn't that? And I'm inquiring here. Don't you think one more of those? It's like I need a new bank, because if I'm a MicroStrategy and I'm banking with JP Morgan or whatever, one of the main, and I've got that, I can't change the accrual thing, but at some point, if I'm going to convert my cash from U.S. Treasuries to BTC as a balance sheet item, then I want to have a bank partner that can lend me against that can do things that a Speedy can do. That
sure, that's what the Speedies are for. But I've said this before. I've been working with S&P 500 companies since my Morgan Stanley days, since 2014, that I know who have been using Bitcoin. Very quietly. They do not want to be in the newspaper. It's very small. It's in markets where there are not well-developed banking systems, but they don't want it on their books because of the punitive accounting treatment. So for MicroStrategy, which is a tech company, and really probably doesn't have a lot of accrual issues in its financial statements just because of the nature of its business, it's a little easier for them than it would be for a Fortune 5 company to do it, because that would just be too radical. So this is another problem. It's another hill we've got to climb.
Is it less of an issue for like a SaaS or a consulting-based company, or because MicroStrategy is a business intelligence company.
Right?
I can't remember if they're consultancy or SaaS.
Right. It's a fee-based business.
Yeah.
So
they don't have the work in process issue,
right?
Right. So maybe that's an angle too. Is just I don't know.
Well, we'll figure it out. I didn't mean to derail the conversation, but this has been a fun spitball, because we've done everything we can on legal and tax in Wyoming, the accounting thing. But it's fun also, Representative Lindholm, maybe you can talk about how we tweaked the telecom lobbyists and got the telecom lobbyists from Washington, D.C. to show up to our meeting last meeting.
Yeah, so that was fun. They weren't expecting the hillbilly with the big cowboy hat to beat them like a drum. But I think I did. So one of the aspects that we've got is when we're looking at the telecom industry, these larger telecom industries, is SIM swaps, right? So we've toyed with some legislation. I think we've got a pretty solid piece that we're looking at right now. where we hold telecom accountable if any of their employees are involved in that swap, which is largely the case in these big swaps. There's someone on the inside that is assisting. And obviously they don't like that type of legislation because they don't feel like they should be held accountable. And so they did send out the big DC lobbyists to come after us and teach us hay seats in Wyoming, how things are supposed to be happening. What they didn't count on, or they didn't get briefed on, is that we're one of the most tech savvy legislatures in the nation as it stands right now. So
It was not well received, shall we say.
it was not well received. We moved that legislation forward, and you will see it in the 2021 session. I don't know if we'll be successful, but it is a pretty good pace.
So what would that legislation be if I'm a T-Mobile customer or a Verizon customer in Wyoming and someone sim jacks me or something, that T-Mobile's responsible because their socially engineered call center gave up ported my number, or
Yeah, if that was the case,
would I have to be a resident though, or would I just have to be in Wyoming when it happened?
you would have to be a resident of the state of Wyoming.
Okay, so it wouldn't protect a traveler coming through if it happened on their way through.
No, because technically the action at that point with you being an out-of-state resident takes place wherever your device is set up at.
Okay.
The other piece, though, in addition to that, we're branching beyond blockchain, is what you're hearing,
Sure, yeah.
to general tech issues. But the other piece that is so interesting is that I think we're on the verge of doing something in identity. We've looked at identity for 3 different years, and it finally feels like something's going to gel. And
Yeah, no, I think when we're looking, well, and not just on digital identity, but on the data rights ownership, I think we hit a real nice spot yesterday where we actually might have, and that's largely in thanks to you and pulling in Dr. Reyes. I mean, there's some real things that are going to shake as far as data rights very soon in the state of Wyoming. But in regards to that digital identity aspect, I mean, that is a tough cookie to crack. But whoever figures it out first, it's going to be bonkers. I think if Wyoming nails this, and we've got a real possibility to do it, I think it'll be bigger than Speedy and ICO bill and all of that combined and spitball together. Because at that point, by hitting that, you're not only cracking just the digital identity aspect unto itself, but you're cracking all the problems that have been put in place because of identity through regulatory hurdles. And that becomes truly a powerful tool.
Well, one of the interesting things is right down the road. This is a company we invested in 2018, Clear, and Clear OS is the only mobile operating system right now where you don't have a password, you don't have that. Your digital identity is literally a 24-seat phrase that you set up, and this blocks all of your data from Google, from Facebook, whatever, gives you it's called Clear GM, and I can literally get paid in token for letting BMW see me when I'm in the market for a 4-door sedan. And they have a healthcare plan, and they have a bunch of other things integrated. They're right down the road of Park City. They're very familiar with this market. And Brittany, I put it on her radar the other day because it's actually shipping as of January. And so attracting a company like that to come here and say, look, what if we were what if we had a digital identity that was a Wyoming e-resident identity tied to our Clear ID and our cell phone base? I'm just spitballing totally outside of it, but there's companies right in this region that would happily go 8 hours away from where they are if there was a competitive reason to do so and be part of something revolutionary. And
I think if they ever saw Wyoming coming from Park City, I mean, it's a no-brainer.
Oh no,
Utah sucks.
they've been here before, but I think what it is they, more about what is the compelling collaboration between that private enterprise and the legislature that says, here's a proof point where you're now empowering Native American markets and you're giving people that are undocumented not only an ecosystem to earn in, but a way to own their data and be monetized for all the data exhaust we all kick off every day. So it's almost like UBI, but with an actual, I'm actually creating real value, right? And that value is mapped to me and I own it, from my HIPAA compliance stuff to everything else. And so the technology exists, it's shipping, it's open source, and I turned it on 2 days ago.
You got service?
Yeah. No, I mean, it works. This is my phone. So,
Wow.
so this is a company that I've already put, they know about Wyoming, but I've already put them back in conversation. And I didn't realize that there's potentially legislation that's relevant to that around identity, but it would be an interesting dialogue to have in the mix to see how they what they have and how what you're trying to envision, if there's any alignment. I have no idea if there would be or not.
Well,
But-
yeah, I think so. A lot of what we have concentrated on, and I still think it's, and Caitlin, I don't know where you're still at on this one, but I still think the most important thing that can be done in regards to digital identity is the KYC AML fix. By being able to share data if needed.
Yeah, well, I'm living that, right? Because the banking industry is where all that data gets collected. And as we literally just saw in the BuzzFeed leak last weekend, there's a lot of surveillance that happens through the financial system on innocent people. And all that data gets handed over without a warrant, without probable cause. And it's not secure, right? It was a felony to leak those suspicious activities reports, but I doubt there'll ever be anyone prosecuted for it. Yeah. And in fact, actually, I think it was, Tim, you said what government does when something doesn't work is they ratchet it up. Guess what? The Bank Secrecy Act requirements are about to be ratcheted up on everybody. The travel rule is now going to be applying to essentially just a couple $100, which essentially means that every financial institution has to track every single transaction in the United States. Yeah, it's coming. But part of what you were trying to do was get at the inefficiency of the way that the different financial institutions all apply the laws, right? But it's really difficult. We've decided for the last 2 years that identity wasn't ready. It wasn't ripe. And it may not still be, but we haven't let it go yet. If there's something that we can do to do it. And the basic concept for those who are listening online is that Satoshi Nakamoto figured out how to make data unique. Each and every human being is unique. So why can't we have unique data that is attributed to us that we control? And that's why this technology is so important. What the legal community is struggling with is not all data is unique. Most data is not unique. And can you own data that is not unique if it's replicable at zero cost? That's what they're struggling with.
Yeah, and the identity thing that's interesting around that is the mesh governance of my various personas, right? Because digitally I show up one way in business, but then I might show up another way on the weekend in health or what have you. And these things are the edges that come together that form the whole me. But in a digital world, you know, a lot of that's unique. Some of it crosses over. But that's cool that, again, you're looking at legislation related to the bleeding edge. I mean, that's awesome. We've got a couple more minutes and then we're going to take a lunch break. Anybody have a question or comment for Tim or?
Yeah, I want to know specifically, if you can, Mr. Draper, what's it going to take? I want it all. I want Draper University. I want your businesses. I want your primary residence. How does that happen?
Hey, I've been struggling with this since they, in California, they back dated my taxes. So it wasn't like, you know, a deal's a deal. All of a sudden they put something in that said, oh, this applies to
Prop 30.
2008, Prop 30.
Yeah, I left in 2013.
And that's where I started to live a little on the edge. I'm a big fan of the ocean.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe I just need to find water here.
There's a lake about 10 minutes from here.
Is there?
And you can buy a lot for like under 200 grand and put whatever the hell size, build what you want, Tim.
Can I call that my main house?
Well, and see, you'll find this interesting, Mr.
Here's a question.
Yeah.
I thought about this. What if you said, come to Wyoming and we will fight California? So I come to Wyoming and then I don't have to pay my California taxes because you're going to fight them.
I like that.
All of a sudden,
Actually,
then, because here's one of those things. They're saying we own you until you die. It doesn't matter where you go to the moon, and California is still going to
they're
continue
gonna
to
get their
tax
40
you.
basis points for 10 more years, right? Isn't that what they're proposing right now?
Oh
40
yeah,
basis
they're going to.
points for the
I
next
mean, I
10?
think my rates are going to go to 18% and 0.4% of my overall wealth, which somehow is not going to include real estate, but would include stock. And I mean, it totally nuts. And then where are they going to find? How are they going to audit that and everything?
That's an interesting angle, though. That could get quite expensive for the state in a hurry, though.
It
but-
could.
but-
So actually,
although it could be worth it for the
Right.
state.
well, it's actually a fun point. We actually have a fund set up for court cases in the state of Wyoming. That's a little over 47 million, and it grows. We've got it invested, of course, because we're not like California. We invest our funds. And so that 47 million is a growing number. And I think the most we've spent out of it in the last like 10 years is maybe $1 million. So it's just continual growth. So the state does have the ability to take on these bigger type cases. And as far as
It would be interesting if it was like, you have safe harbor. You move from California to another state, you have, or
One
to
of the-
Wyoming, you get safe harbor.
One of the things
And
that
all of a
Arizona
sudden
did
it's like,
right.
whoa, God, that would,
One of the things to that point, though, that Arizona did right, because they got the fintech thing wrong, but the one thing they did right was when Prop 30 passed, because I left, right? But the first thing they did, I didn't get that letter, but the first thing they did, the day it passed, they sent 100 CEOs of companies that were, I think, 50 million and above in California, a letter. And it said, the first 100 people that accept this are getting a 5-day all expense paid trip. And I forget if they put them up at the Phoenician. GPEC did this. So it would be like WBC doing this in equivalent, right? So GPEC's a public-private partnership, Greater Phoenix Economic Council. They sent that out, and within 24 hours, they had 100 CEOs accept it, come out for 5 days. It was basically like, come out for 5 days and see why you should move your business here tomorrow. And they got 100 responses within 24 hours. And I think they had 50 or 60 CEOs within that month move the company. And so it's a similar version of like, we'll fight it for you, but it was so strategic. Prop 30, I was in San Diego. Prop 30 literally was like barely even wet, dry, right? And the freaking thing went out, and it was a land grab. So there could be an angle of find the stupidity, whatever the next stupid thing they do is, and then PR the snot out
it
of it.
won't take long.
I know, it'll be next year. But PR the snot out of it with something like that, some safe harbor thing.
Oh, yeah.
Because it worked and it was smart.
I mean, that's the thing. If somehow those.
Because you could limit it, Tyler. You could say, hey, we got this much money, but we'll fight for 50. The first 20 Tim Drapers are on us, right? And then it's game over because you get 10 or 20 more, then everybody else will pay their own way because they'll have to.
Everybody's loose in the saddle in California. Everybody who's like trying to build something. They're all loose in the saddle. They're all saying, God, this is getting so bad. And they keep making these decisions thinking, somehow this is going to be better for the homeless. It's just going to create more homeless.
Well, and you could go after New York that way
this
too.
is going to be better for, I don't know who, but it always works the other way. It always backfires on them. It's like you put a Band-Aid on an infection and it infects more.
Yeah, Rich believes that the reason they banned flights out of New York to Wyoming and why Dario had to stay home is because of your bank and because Kraken got their license.
I think that's actually,
because he said it to me the other night. I said, I bet you you're right. Like, because why else? There's more cases in one brownstone than in this entire state since March.
mm-hmm.
That doesn't make sense to put Wyoming on the ban list unless you're worried about every bank leaving. Right? And so go after New York too, because no one's living in Manhattan anymore, and all the people that are living in the Hamptons.
We need to have like some type of test or something to take our safe harbor law into consideration. Like, how do you feel about, guns, stuff like that? Because if they answer wrong, we don't want them.
Right. Fair enough. Hey, you put the cowboy coat, right?
Yeah.
The code of the West.
Do you
Last year?
disagree
Yeah.
with any of
Put
this?
that up in there and you
Yeah.
go answer these questions. If you get more than one right or wrong, you can't come.
We can call it the
That is
Wyoming
true. I
draft.
got scared because when I was down in Texas, they're going purple.
Yeah, they are.
Right.
They're, and that's just all these Californians who just got brainwashed by the media, and they're going in and they're voting. And suddenly you've got a state that wants to be more like North Korea than South Korea.
One of the hard parts about economic development for Wyoming is because we do have, we have negative net debt. In other words, we actually have assets. We're one of 2 states that do. And it's because of the Mineral Trust Fund, and that has subsidized the education of all of us, including the University of Wyoming. But of course, coal's not probably ever coming back. And so Wyoming has this embarrassment of riches of super wealthy people moving here. And I've got to tell you, I think it's going to be staggering when the 2020 tax information comes out, and the IRS, you can kind of tell by state of residency where the income was filed. Wyoming, we shared a data point this morning. Year to date, our business entity registrations are up 75%. The taxable income coming through the IRS of people who reside in Wyoming is probably up at least 10x, if not a lot more, because of the number of people, especially from California, but also New York, moving to Jackson Hole. Unfortunately, that part of the state is actually pretty blue, but luckily so far it's not at risk of turning the state purple, so to speak. But here's the challenge: it costs $28,000 per family in Wyoming to educate for the services, education, police, fire, et cetera. And the average taxes paid per family is about $2,500. So that gap means that really attracting too many people here starts to become a budget problem for the state. What we really, really, really need is businesses to generate income and jobs so that there's diversification in the economy. And that is a lot of the deal that got cut. The Stampede banks are paying 2 basis points of assets to the state of Wyoming. Now, it turns out every business in Wyoming pays 2 basis points of assets, but back to your point, so by the way, this is no different, the Stampede banks are no different, but back to the point about corporate taxes. There's no corporate income tax. Everybody has to pay what's called an annual report license fee, which is 2 basis points on your assets, but it's only the assets in Wyoming. It's not your national assets and your national income. California gets you for your national income if you're domiciled in California. So you start looking at what the math looks like on that. Even though it's not literally zero taxes, it's a fee, but it's really a tax. It's your taxes are going to go down 95%. But that was enough in the deal that got cut with the legislature. All the other banks don't have to pay the 2 basis points. When we set up the Stampede Bank framework, they have to pay the 2 basis points. That was enough to get the legislators to say, all right, let's start looking at this digital asset industry and seeing what the revenue generation is going to look like. And you start to get some pretty big numbers. Mm-hmm. And that's the diversification the legislature's looking at, is how do we replace the revenues for coal without necessarily increasing the service burden by having too many people move in here in a short period of time because of that, because we are underwater on current cash flows relative to the services that are paid out. Did I get that right, Representative?
Yeah, no,
Linville?
that's essentially it. I mean, we're in the state of Wyoming, we've been blessed with a huge amount of minerals, and that mineral wealth has led to the fact that we don't pay the normal taxes that you would in Colorado or California or anything like that, because we've got the mineral industry that takes up a lot of that load, to the point that the state of Wyoming during this coronavirus pandemic, I think it was Fortune, or I can't remember what, Financial Times, I think, actually did a study on how long each state could last without revenue. And actually, surprisingly, at the bottom of the list was Kansas. Kansas has no backup funds whatsoever. At the very top of the list is the state of Wyoming, and not by a little bit. Your average state is going to the top of the list was like 110 days or something. And Wyoming's at over 400 days we could last without any revenue, because that's how big our piggy bank is. And that's because of mineral wealth. So as we start to look at some of these regimes that are pushed forward by the executive at the federal level, particularly 2008 to 2016, that has been damaging towards our mineral industry. How do we move on? How do we look at, and so that's why a lot of this is surrounded on fintech, and why we've pushed so hard to attract financial type companies, because we do see that as a new source of revenue, not because we need to raise taxes on those, but because that's adding jobs, it adds property tax, it adds sales tax, all of those things without raising a dime on anyone. And so that's been really our big push, because Caitlin is right. It is right around $28,000 on an annualized basis that each citizen receives in benefits, and pays in about $2,000 in benefit. $2,000.
Family of 4, I think it is. Yeah.
Is it a family
Yeah.
of 4?
Yeah.
So it's kind of wild.
It's a cool place, though. There's a lot you can do with that. So actually, Tim, this would be a.
So those, that discrepancy between the amount you're paying out to people and the amount they're paying in, over time, that's going to decrease. Is there a plan?
That's what everybody's struggling with, which is why the economic diversification is so important. And the whole idea of attracting outside capital here and outside companies here is really the priority, because there has to be another way to generate revenues for the state. They have cut that budget. There's one, not to get into too much detail, but there's really one impediment, because everybody's committed. I mean, literally, there's no income tax coming to Wyoming, period. That is very clear. It's never going to happen in my lifetime. What's going to happen is the property taxes might go up, et cetera, to close that gap. But, and they're very low to begin with. There's one thing that needs to be taken on in this state, which is a Supreme Court decision essentially saying that every education has to be equal. And so what that has meant is that the state has put glorious new school buildings in rural areas that are in the boom bust areas of the state, and then they might be open for a year and then literally close for the next 10. So there's just an enormous amount of waste that goes into that, and I'm hoping that the legislature starts rethinking with distance learning and things like that you don't need all that infrastructure, and that we can actually take that education cost down without reducing the amount that's actually spent on the students.
Well, that's actually in the Wyoming Constitution, that all education shall be equal. I mean, I'm sure our founders of this state thought that was just like the greatest line ever, but it has screwed us so hard.
What does it mean to be equal?
Yeah, it doesn't. Well, what it means is you end up going to court every time you.
All the way along and have entirely different
Right. So you've got your large populations like Laramie and Cheyenne and Casper, where they're able to provide, 5 or 6 different languages being taught in their high schools. Well, in order for that to be equal across the state, that means those same opportunities must exist in Hewlett, which is a town of 400, and maybe has 10 kids graduate each year. And so it was certainly a nice warm feeling, and we're very proud of our education system in the state of Wyoming. But the reality is there's a lot of waste that happens in regards to buildings, administrative costs, those types of things that we need to get our arms around. And who's going to run the bill that gets rid of that line in the Constitution, right? I mean, put yourself out in front of a firing squad. So it's a trick. We will end up in court probably in the next year with the Wyoming Supreme Court trying to figure this deal out.
Mm-hmm.
You could make all education online, and then the rest of it is activities.
Right.
And maybe everybody gets the same education online, but then there are these activities that are different in different places.
Right.
And you might be able to step around it.
Exactly.
We've thought about that. The problem we've got with that scenario, though, is Wyoming is a fairly rural state, and there are areas where you're just not going to get internet. And there are people.
You have to put internet in.
Yeah, yeah, you're going to have to drag fiber.
Yeah.
You're going to have to get Western with dragging fiber, and but yeah, it's certainly. I think it's the future, online learning. I do. I can't do it either. My wife she's actually UW student right now. She does online learning and she's a whiz at it and smarter than hell. And I don't even have a degree. So
You're almost an electrical engineer though. You're
Not
close to
online.
your degree. Right.
Well, that'll take us to lunch, and then we've got one more fireside between Caitlin and Tim to go deeper on more topics. So
Fantastic.
take a break. Josh, thank you for being in. You got any final comments for us, Josh, from your standpoint?
No, I think I just wanted to introduce you all to my newest recruiting manager, Representative Tyler Lindholm, who's working really hard. I appreciate that. No, thanks everybody. And thank you for letting me be a part of this fantastic group.
Awesome. Thank you.